No one could have imagined that what began as an innocent trip to buy candy would turn into a case that shook the entire United Kingdom. Two 10-year-old girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, vanished on a summer afternoon in the town of Soham, Cambridgeshire. 13 days later, their decomposed bodies were found in a wooded area, 20 kilometers from home, showing signs of fire damage and suspected intentional killing. Stay with us until the end of the video to follow the full developments of this case. In the peaceful town of Soham, Cambridgeshire, two families, the Wellers and the Chapmans, shared a special bond through their daughters, 10-year-olds Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Best friends since early childhood, the two girls were inseparable. Holly was gentle and reserved, while Jessica was more outgoing, but their personalities complemented each other perfectly. They were often seen laughing together and never argued. Their shared love of football only brought them closer, as they played and watched matches regularly. On Sunday, the 4th of August, 2002, temperatures soared, and the girls made plans to enjoy the summer heat. Jessica had just returned from a 2-week holiday and was eager to catch up. Around midday, she left her home on Brook Street and walked to Holly's, a short 10-minute distance. She brought along a gift, a necklace with the letter H, and 2 dolphins. The girls, joined by a friend named Natalie, played games and listened to music before Natalie left. Later that afternoon, Holly and Jessica changed into matching Manchester United shirts with David Beckham's name, their football idol. Around 5 p.m., Holly's mother snapped a photo of them grinning in their red jerseys. After dinner, the two returned to Holly's room to continue playing on the computer. Around 6:15 p.m., without telling anyone, they quietly left the house. CCTV at 6:30 p.m. captured the girls near a local sports center, believed to be heading to buy sweets. Minutes later, they were spotted walking near College Road. At 8 p.m., the families realized the girls weren't upstairs as assumed. After a frantic local search, Holly and Jessica were reported missing shortly before 10 o'clock that night. Within hours of Holly and Jessica's disappearance, police from 3 forces joined the effort, along with hundreds of local residents. The situation was alarming from the start. The girls were bright, well-behaved, and had never gone missing before. They knew the area well, and the idea that they had wandered off and gotten lost seemed highly unlikely. Soham was a close-knit community where people looked out for each other. Most believed that if anyone had seen the girls or noticed anything unusual, they would have intervened. Police set up their command center at the girls' primary school, and media coverage exploded. The story dominated headlines and became the largest missing child investigation the local force had ever handled. A photo of the girls in matching football shirts, taken just hours before they vanished, was released and quickly became iconic. Search efforts grew rapidly, with people from across the country joining in. Police scoured the girls' school and nearby Soham Village College, but found nothing. As days passed, it became clear, though unspoken, that the girls had likely come to harm. Both families joined police to make a public appeal, tearfully emphasizing how protective they were. They explained their daughters were never allowed out alone and had been taught never to trust strangers. The head teacher echoed this, stating that the risk of strangers had long been addressed in school. Police began to suspect that the girls may have been approached by someone they knew and trusted. The reward for information about Holly and Jessica had climbed to £1 million, showing the urgency and scale of the investigation. Police interviewed every registered sex offender in Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire, as well as over 260 individuals nationwide. All were cleared of involvement. The case captured national attention, and even football star David Beckham, the girls' favorite player, issued a heartfelt appeal. He told the girls they were not in trouble and urged them to come home to their families who loved them deeply. Police efforts to retrace the final known steps of Holly and Jessica led to a dramatic reconstruction using 2 young girls from a local drama group. Dressed identically to the missing 10-year-olds, the girls wore matching Manchester United shirts, sports trousers, and styled hair resembling Holly and Jessica's as closely as possible. The goal was to recreate their movements from 6 days earlier, hoping to prompt memories from those who might have seen something but hadn't realized its importance at the time. The girls' reconstructed path followed confirmed sightings from the evening they disappeared. Around 6 p.m., they were seen walking along Sand Street, heading toward the local sports center, where they were caught on CCTV. Later, just before 7 p.m., they were spotted again near the War Memorial in the High Street. These sightings formed the foundation of the timeline detectives were using, and the visual reenactment was intended to trigger new leads from anyone who had been nearby that evening. Police emphasized that even small observations could prove vital. They appealed to the public to come forward if the reconstruction jogged any memory, even if what they remembered seemed insignificant. At the same time, investigators confirmed that a review of the girls' computer activity showed no evidence that they had been in contact with anyone through online chat rooms or had arranged to meet someone. That theory, which had been considered early in the investigation, was now dismissed. Meanwhile, the search for Holly and Jessica continued at full scale. Specialist officers were deployed to inspect the drainage systems in Soham, and search zones were expanding outward into the flat, rural terrain of the Cambridgeshire Fens. Despite being one of the largest missing person investigations in British history, there was still no sign of the girls. Yet police remained hopeful, and additional officers were brought in to handle what they anticipated would be a flood of tips following the reconstruction. Police remained convinced that Holly and Jessica were still alive and likely being held together against their will. As media coverage intensified, the number of tips surged, overwhelming the small local police station. In response, Detective Chief Superintendent Chris Stevenson was appointed to lead the investigation. His first move was to narrow the scope, focusing less on national leads and more on local ground, starting again with the last steps the girls took near their homes. The neighborhood was compact and familiar to the girls. They lived close to each other, attended the same school, and had no reason to stray far. Investigators revisited every confirmed sighting and soon realized that no one had seen the girls beyond College Close. Beyond that point, there were no witnesses, no CCTV evidence, and no sign of them. One person especially willing to cooperate was Ian Huntley, the 28-year-old caretaker at Soham Village College. He quickly became a familiar face in media coverage and spoke openly to reporters about seeing the girls on the day they disappeared. In a widely circulated Sky News interview, Huntley described the girls walking near the college grounds around 5:15 p.m. on Sunday, the 4th of August. He said they had just come from the nearby sports center, possibly after buying sweets, and were taking a familiar route past the school. According to him, the girls appeared cheerful and relaxed. He explained that the girls looked safe and happy, and nothing seemed unusual about the encounter. Based on the timeline, he believed he may have been the last known person to see them before they vanished. Huntley's willingness to speak, his calm demeanor, and detailed account made him appear helpful at the time. But as the case unfolded, his presence at the center of events and his eagerness to stay involved would raise serious questions. At the time of the girls' disappearance, Ian Huntley lived with his partner, Maxine Carr. The two had met in Grimsby in 1999 before moving to Soham in 2001 for work. Maxine, 25 years old, worked as a teaching assistant at Holly and Jessica's primary school. The girls adored her, often giving her drawings and handwritten notes. A month earlier, Maxine had applied for a full-time position but wasn't selected. Holly had been upset and gave her a card, saying how much she would miss her. As the search intensified, the emotional weight on the community deepened. Families, friends, and volunteers looked through rivers, fields, and wooded areas. Huntley, who had initially been eager to speak with the media, soon became overwhelmed by attention. He began asking that his interviews be shown only on local broadcasts, claiming the information he shared was only relevant to the area. During several interviews, Huntley repeated that he may have been the last known person to see the girls. He expressed guilt, wondering if saying something different could have made them stay longer or changed what happened. He reflected on this with a calm, serious tone, portraying himself as someone disturbed by the situation but cooperative and engaged in helping. He also encouraged locals to stay alert and think critically about the people around them. He urged neighbors to watch for suspicious behavior and report anything strange. Though his message appeared to come from concern, His repeated insistence on limiting interviews to local audiences would later raise suspicion, an early signal that not everything about his involvement was as it seemed. With help from a forensic engineer, police examined Jessica's mobile phone data. Her device had last pinged a tower near Soham Village College at 6:37 p.m. before it was manually switched off. That location was just steps from Ian and Maxine's home. The digital trail and timeline began to point in a troubling direction. Meanwhile, Huntley's media presence became strained. He appeared increasingly worn down, losing weight and showing signs of emotional stress. Officers reported him breaking down while going door to door, questioning if he was being treated as a suspect. At the same time, Maxine Carr continued speaking to the press and participating in searches, but as attention intensified on Huntley, she too came under closer watch. During a televised interview with Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson, Maxine Carr reflected on Holly and Jessica with warm memories, describing them as kind, cheerful, and deeply loved by their families. However, something in her phrasing caught attention. She referred to the girls in the past tense. Once the segment ended, producers rolled back the tape to confirm it. Indeed, she had said, that's the kind of girl she was, even though the girls were still officially missing. The comment sent a chill through the studio. Although unsettling, it wasn't enough to justify any direct action from investigators. While police continued door-to-door inquiries, one officer recalled a peculiar moment. Ian Huntley had leaned casually on the side of a patrol car and asked a strange question: how long DNA could survive? His relaxed demeanor and odd curiosity stood out. The officer also noticed several scratches on Huntley's face. When asked, he explained they were from playing with his dog. Despite their growing suspicion, there was still no concrete evidence linking him to the girl's disappearance. As Huntley remained in the media spotlight, people in his hometown of Grimsby began to recognize his face. Calls began flooding into the local newspaper, the Grimsby Telegraph, from residents who had troubling stories to share about Huntley's past. Journalist Peter Craig took the lead, receiving multiple tips suggesting that Huntley had a disturbing history involving young girls and abusive behavior. Though never formally charged, Huntley had faced 9 separate allegations over the years, including sexual assault of minors and cruelty to animals. He had even admitted to numerous sexual encounters with teenage girls. Some victims were reportedly as young as 11. Since none of these incidents had gone to trial, they didn't appear on any criminal record. Still, the pattern of behavior was deeply troubling. With each new revelation, suspicions around Ian Huntley grew darker and harder to ignore. In 1994, Ian Huntley married a woman named Claire after a brief courtship. Though things began quickly, the relationship became strained. Claire later described feeling uneasy throughout their time together. The divorce process dragged on for 5 years. During this period, Huntley entered a relationship with a 15-year-old named Emma, who moved into his mother's home. When authorities became aware, an investigation was opened but soon closed, as no formal complaint was made. Emma's situation worsened when she became pregnant. After a miscarriage, she left the relationship and later spoke of regret for not seeking help sooner. Huntley soon became involved with Katie, whose experience followed a similar pattern. She also became pregnant but chose to raise her child alone after leaving. Meanwhile, Huntley was still married to Claire, who eventually moved on and later married his younger brother. In Grimsby, unsettling stories about Huntley's past began to resurface. While none of the incidents had led to charges, many locals recalled his troubling behavior. When he moved to Soham with Maxine Carr, it seemed like an attempt to leave those concerns behind. Maxine described him as caring and affectionate in the early days, though her family believed his behavior was more controlling than genuine. Over time, the tone of their relationship shifted. Neighbors began noticing raised voices and tension at their home. What had once looked like a loving partnership began to reflect familiar warning signs. Despite a new setting and fresh start, old habits appeared to be re-emerging and drawing quiet attention once again. As the investigation deepened, Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr were brought in for voluntary interviews. Maxine claimed she had spent the evening with Ian, offering a detailed timeline of their day. Her account appeared composed, filled with routine domestic moments. Meanwhile, Ian's responses were notably subdued. He remained silent for long stretches and gave vague answers when asked about basic facts, showing hesitation even when discussing widely known details. But the story began to unravel when police confirmed that Maxine had actually been in Grimsby on the 4th of August. Her entire account was false, and with it, Ian lost his only alibi. Despite mounting concerns, investigators still lacked direct evidence and had no choice but to release them. However, suspicions remained high, especially regarding Ian's previous cooperation during an earlier school search, where he may have misled officers. Determined to revisit every possible lead, Chris Stevenson ordered a second search of the school where Ian worked. This time, the team conducted a far more thorough sweep. Eventually, they found a yellow bin containing a black bag. Inside were burned and torn pieces of 2 red football shirts, identical to those worn by Holly and Jessica the day they disappeared. It was the first piece of physical evidence directly tying the case to Ian. The discovery marked a pivotal breakthrough. For Chris Stevenson, it was deeply emotional. He later described it as a moment that would stay with him for the rest of his life. With the shirts confirmed, police had enough to move forward. Ian Huntley was arrested for the abduction and murder of both girls. Maxine Carr was also taken into custody on suspicion of murder. They were transferred to separate stations for questioning, and for the first time, the case shifted from theory to formal action. After his arrest, Ian Huntley phoned his mother's home and said little, only that he was near Cambridge. When asked directly if he was involved, his response was simply, "I love you." That was enough to make his family fear the worst. Police placed Ian and Maxine in separate safe houses while more searches were carried out. Their home was spotless, with no visible evidence left behind, suggesting someone had gone to great lengths to clean thoroughly. Attention soon shifted to Ian's vehicle. Forensic teams discovered all 4 tires had recently been changed, the back lining had been replaced, and traces of construction material were found underneath. Investigators located the garage that did the work, where a mechanic said Huntley had insisted on replacing tires that didn't need changing and even paid extra to falsify license plate details in the records. This occurred just 1 day after the girls had gone missing. As investigators closed in, Maxine Carr changed her story. She admitted she had not been with Ian on the night in question and had lied out of fear that his past might lead to assumptions. Her admission dismantled Ian's alibi entirely. Meanwhile, Huntley's behavior during interviews grew more erratic. He was no longer talkative or cooperative, often avoiding questions and appearing mentally detached. His withdrawn state led police to order a psychological evaluation. While authorities continued their efforts, the absence of the girls remained the most painful gap. Though many had come to accept the likely outcome, the lack of final answers kept hope alive for some. With no confirmed location or condition, the investigation stood at a turning point between suspicion, silence, and a heartbreaking unknown. Friends and neighbors of Holly's family continued their own search efforts near the A10 Cambridge Road, an area where the girls had reportedly last been seen. The search was exhausting and uncertain, but those involved held tightly to hope, determined not to give up. However, nearly 2 weeks after the girls vanished, the investigation took a devastating turn. A member of the public stumbled upon 2 small bodies, side by side, in a wooded area near RAF Lakenheath, around 12 miles from Soham. Though official confirmation was still pending, authorities were almost certain the remains belonged to Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. The news spread quickly, bringing a wave of sorrow and disbelief. Investigators announced the findings at a press conference, acknowledging the likelihood of the worst possible outcome. The families had been informed, and the community braced for a loss they had feared but tried not to imagine. The impact was felt far beyond the town. People across the country mourned, and in Soham, crowds gathered at the local church to process the tragedy. Just a week earlier, prayers had been offered for the girls' safe return. Now, the focus shifted to grief, shock, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. For many, it felt impossible to comprehend how such a horrifying event could happen in a place so familiar and close-knit. Reporters covering the story described the mood as one of overwhelming stillness and sorrow. Jeremy Thompson, who had interviewed both Ian Huntley and Maxine Carr, later said it was one of the darkest days of his journalistic career. What had begun as a desperate search had ended in heartbreak and left a nation asking how such tragedy could unfold so quietly, so close to home. DNA testing confirmed the worst fears. The remains found in the woods were those of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Decomposition and burn damage made it impossible to determine an exact cause or time of death, though asphyxiation was considered likely. Forensic reports hinted at possible assault, but no conclusive evidence was found. Officers gently advised the families not to view the bodies due to their condition. Tributes soon poured in from across the UK. Football matches observed moments of silence in the girls' honor. David Beckham dedicated a goal to them during a Chelsea versus Manchester United game. Messages of support came from sports figures and even world leaders. One local group of boys left behind a football covered in handwritten goodbyes. A simple, but deeply moving gesture. While little evidence could be gathered from the bodies, investigators were still testing clothing found in a school bin. The results revealed that fibers from the girls' red shirts matched those on Ian Huntley's clothes and boots. His DNA was also found on the bin liner, and debris under his car matched the area where the bodies had been discovered. With this, authorities finally had enough. At 4 a.m., Ian Huntley was officially charged with 2 counts of murder. Maxine Carr faced charges for perverting the course of justice and assisting an offender. What began with uncertainty had now moved firmly into the pursuit of justice. Public outrage grew quickly. Ian Huntley became a figure of intense hatred, symbolizing the horror of what had happened. Police informed Maxine Carr that he had been officially charged with 2 counts of murder. His fingerprints had been found on the bag that contained crucial evidence, reinforcing the case against him. Later that day, a memorial service was held at Ely Cathedral to honor Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. The event was private, attended by family, police, and residents of Soham. It was described as a celebration of the girls' lives, a way to remember their joy, even in the midst of tragedy. Both schools the girls had attended had been closed off during the investigation. There were fears they wouldn't reopen in time for the new term. But school officials confirmed they would welcome students back. Extra support and counseling would be provided, acknowledging the emotional impact on both students and staff. As anger and grief rippled through the town, Holly and Jessica were laid to rest. Though their loss remained deeply felt, the community began taking the first steps toward healing, guided by memory, resilience, and the hope that such pain would never be repeated. While Ian Huntley was held in a secure psychiatric hospital, legal proceedings paused. Investigators suspected he was exaggerating his condition but waited for a formal ruling. Maxine Carr supported him for months, writing regularly until December 2002, when she suddenly cut off contact. After 50 days of psychiatric evaluation, the judge declared Huntley fit for trial. He was moved to prison, and both he and Maxine pleaded not guilty when the trial began in November 2003. How Huntley lured the girls into his home remains uncertain. Many believe he exploited their trust in Maxine, possibly claiming they could see her. Familiar with him from school, the girls likely felt safe. Just minutes earlier, Huntley had argued with Maxine, and some believe his actions were impulsive. Others suspect a darker, premeditated motive, but with only Huntley's version, the full truth is unknown. Inside the house, Huntley likely locked the doors. Investigators believe he applied force to one person's neck in the bathroom before turning to the other. In court, he told a different story, claiming the deaths were accidental. According to him, the girls came for help with a nosebleed. He said Holly drowned after a slip, and Jessica was suffocated while he tried to silence her screams. Huntley denied faking mental illness, saying the trauma caused memory loss, but few believed him. To many, it felt like another attempt to twist the truth, deepening the sense of betrayal already surrounding the case. The prosecution dismissed Ian Huntley's testimony as utterly implausible, calling it a calculated attempt to control the narrative until the very end. They argued that his account was designed purely to shift responsibility and avoid the consequences of his actions. As the trial progressed, Maxine Carr also took the stand in her own defense. Maxine claimed she initially believed Ian might have been unfaithful because the bedding had been freshly washed when she returned home. When asked why she had helped clean the house so thoroughly, she said it was simply due to her obsession with tidiness. She admitted to lying about her whereabouts only because she feared Ian would be wrongly accused, and insisted she had encouraged him to speak to police about the nosebleed. Maxine stated that had she known the full truth, she would never have supported him. Throughout the case, opinions about Maxine were divided. Some believed her past hardships made her vulnerable to Ian's manipulation, while others argued that she knowingly played a part in concealing a crime. One senior officer publicly stated he believed she was just as cold and calculating as Huntley himself, and deserving of no sympathy. As the trial neared its conclusion, the prosecution portrayed both Ian and Maxine as practiced liars. They urged the jury to reject the idea that the girls' deaths were accidental, calling the claim a desperate fabrication. They asserted that the events in Huntley's home were sexually motivated, and that once things spiraled beyond his control, he killed the girls to protect himself. As for Maxine, prosecutors argued she did everything in her power to shield Ian, regardless of the cost. The defense offered little more than a request for the jury to consider a lesser verdict of manslaughter. But in December 2003, Ian Huntley was convicted on 2 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 40 years. He narrowly avoided a mandatory whole life order due to a change in legislation that came into effect the day after his sentencing. Maxine Carr received 3.5 years for perverting the course of justice, but was released under a new identity within 6 months. At sentencing, both families spoke publicly. Les Chapman described Huntley as a time bomb and said their daughters were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. He expressed hope that the next time he saw Huntley, it would be in a coffin. In the aftermath, serious concerns were raised about how Huntley managed to secure a school caretaker job despite his troubling past. A public inquiry, known as the Betrayal report, revealed that Huntley had lied about his name and background, and no proper background checks were done. Maxine Carr had also submitted false academic credentials that went unnoticed. The inquiry led to major changes in how authorities handle background checks. A national police database was established to ensure law enforcement agencies could better share information about known offenders. The goal was to prevent future failures that could allow dangerous individuals access to vulnerable communities, especially children. Since his incarceration, Huntley has faced repeated attacks. He suffered burns from boiling water, was severely attacked around the neck, and is believed to have attempted an extreme escape many times. He once filed legal action against the prison system after claiming staff failed to protect him. Although he is eligible for parole in 2042 at age 68, many believe he should never be released. To many observers, Huntley's obsession with staying close to the investigation and in the public eye only confirmed what they already believed, that he was manipulative, dangerous, and driven by self-interest until the very end. In 2004, Ian Huntley's parents revealed that he had finally admitted Jessica's death was not an accident. While he remained vague about Holly, they continued pressing him for the full truth, hoping that one day the Wells and Chapman families might find some form of closure. That same year, the house at 5 College Close, where the tragedy unfolded, was demolished. The property now exists only as a patch of grass. Kevin Wells, Holly's father, became a founding patron of the bereavement charity Grief Encounter. He even ran the London Marathon to raise funds in honor of his daughter. He later shared that the trauma nearly destroyed his marriage, but over time, he and his wife Nicola rebuilt their relationship. Their home was filled with her presence, though they refused to live in the past. In 2006, the Wells family moved out of their house to ease the emotional burden. Years later, in 2012, they returned. The Chapman family is believed to still reside in Soham, but has largely stayed out of the public eye since the trial. Both families have grieved in private, away from media attention, choosing healing over headlines. The search for the girls had been one of Britain's most extensive efforts, involving over 400 officers from 21 forces and thousands of public tips. Despite that immense response, the outcome was devastating. What began as a typical summer afternoon, 2 best friends walking to buy sweets in a familiar neighborhood, ended in unimaginable tragedy. Even 2 decades later, the case still haunts the public. The memory of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman continues to echo through a nation that will never forget what was lost that day. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our related videos to uncover more real cases that still haunt the world.